political theories. And to better understand this particular topic or put it in perspective, talking about violence and everything, we are having Dr. Sentongo Ashad, who is the Executive Director, GAPS Uganda. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. How are you?
This is Record Television and the Big Daybreaker Show. We set to invite is our brand as Record TV. But first here, we put some good in people's morning. Thank you so much once again for coming to join us here.
You're welcome. I'm excited also to be here. I'm honored.
Violence among the young people.
Yes.
First and foremost, Doctor, as a researcher in this particular topic, what is violence? What can we term as violence?
Violence is at two levels, according to research. There is direct violence, where you see people killing each other directly, murders, guns, shooting around. It goes on to civil wars, inflicting pain. That one is always the most attractive, tends to attract people a lot. But there is what Johann Galtung calls indirect violence. Or structural violence. Violence that is not directed onto you, but it is built within the system and structures. And the violence is the denial of opportunities as a result of the system. You apply for jobs, they recruit particular people.
That is violence as well.
Wait, and then they say you did not qualify. But when you see those who didn't qualify, you establish that there is a pattern, that the denial, the failure is following. Some people are being structurally or systematically excluded. That is indirect violence, and it is the most dangerous. The direct violence is often an outcome of the indirect violence that exists. So in this project at GAPS, we collaborated with the International Development Research Council, IDRS in Canada, to understand youth responses to violence.
The youth responses to violence.
How do the youth respond to violence? And in this case, in areas of exclusion, discrimination, and injustice, because those are the critical drivers. If somebody is saying, I have been denied and I need to fight, it is one of the three. Either injustice has existed, or discrimination has existed, has manifested, or some kind of exclusion has existed. So everything you see happening there is an outcome, is a response to injustice, discrimination, and exclusion. We thought to examine youth responses to that.
Youth responses in particular to the violence, but particularly focusing on exclusion, discrimination, and injustice.
As the underlying drivers, violence is an outcome.
Violence is not something out of the blue that it stands independent.
No, it evolves over time.
It is a symptom, rather.
It is a symptom. The problem is that we get so much attracted to dealing with the symptom. You'll buy vehicles, you'll buy anti-riot gadgets, and so on and so forth to stop youth from demonstrating. But the underlying drivers of that mobilization persist and endure, and that is what has explained Uganda's enduring civil wars and military coup d'etats and youth public demonstrations, is because the critical drivers of those responses have always persisted across time and place.
That is Dr. Sentongo Ashad, the Executive Director, GAPS Uganda. He has done research in violence. And we are understanding new aspects as far as violence is concerned, that there is direct violence and indirect violence. Doctor, in this particular research, what have you zeroed down? Which violence is disturbing us mostly as a country, Uganda? Where should we put our focus? Direct violence or indirect violence?
First of all, in the research that we are doing, we took two perspectives. One is the type of research, is the type of violence that has manifested for half a century. Uganda has been at war
for half a century.
For the last 45 years or 50. We have not lived a day without reading or having Ugandans participating in some form of violence to fight in discrimination, injustice, and exclusion. But we asked the question, all Ugandans do not participate. How do the others who don't participate deal with injustice, exclusion, and discrimination? How do the majority of, because according to research, much as you see a lot of attraction and excitement with violence, less than 5% of people actually participate who are affected.
But you realize even when 5% participate, the effects extend beyond the 5% to almost engages the biggest part of the
Exactly,
population.
because one, violence itself, it's attractive. It attracts a lot of attention. Secondly, it is very costly. It is very costly. It is cheaper to construct a road or a hospital that people are complaining about than importing military gadgets and weapons to fight those who want to demonstrate because of the hospital. It is cheaper to construct the road, you know, but the attraction has always been to react. Our research has focused with IDRC, has focused on looking at what mechanisms can be built amongst the youth. You see the people power movement now.
People power, it's very much taken over by young people.
And I'm using movement as an academic. I use the word movement in inverted commas. But the people power movement is actually an outcome.
I'm so interested in the word movement in inverted commas before you look at the outcome of the people power. Why do you have to indicate the quotes on the word movement, Doctor?
You see, a movement is determined after the fact. You cannot determine a movement at the beginning.
So in other words, now does NRM has the right to call itself the movement?
That is still debatable. The last, according to research, the last movement that completed the cycle was the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, according to research. The other movement that completed the cycle is the civil rights movement in the United States that transformed, you know, there is always that 360-degree turn, that you have slaves, black slaves, that produce an African president, a black president in the United States. That is
very powerful
that you have the apartheid system in the blacks in South Africa,
first black president,
completing the cycle. So we still have to engage these concepts that the NRM using, resistance, national, to see whether there is a transformation that captures the 360-degree. Has there been a transformation from the reasons that led to the beginning of the war? Where do we trace the 360-degree? I'm just picking out one criteria for a movement to qualify as a movement.
That is Dr. Sentongo, Ashad. But now back to the question of the processes that you're looking at and mechanisms in your study that can actually transfer us to look at violence in a much better way. To address this problem, you said that has troubled us for almost half a century, which is too big. Where have you been, Dr. Sentongo?
Well, first I've been studying. Secondly, in the research we have conducted with IDRC, we have determined that resilience and relationships and social bonds are very strong characteristics that many of the people who do not participate in violence utilize, not only to deflect the incitement to participate, but even to create alternatives towards personal development or individual development or personal advancement. Our research has proved that in so many communities, resilience exists. And in other words, there is always the will and the determination to resist among those who do not participate. But not only because they don't want to participate, but because they prefer to create alternatives towards self-advancement. Strong relationships that are guided by culture, religion, peer influence are also very strong influencers, if I may use the word, for non-participation in violence. Social bonds, where people have value systems at a social level, are very strong influencers for non-participation in violence. The challenge we have is that how do you bring these into the system of government, the systems of education, the system of managing society, to make sure that we cultivate a strong, resilient community, a strong relationships amongst people, and strong social bonds that guide people towards self-advancement. Our research has also shown that whenever self-advancement is expressed amongst people, and we went in different places, we were in Kamocha here in the market.
Just here.
Just here across. We went to Jinja in the markets. We went to Chiseka border borders and look for them. Those who do not participate, how do they deal with the conditions? When we discovered that people do not participate, the overarching motivation is self-advancement. But they don't talk about self-advancement at a national level. Ugandans do not subscribe yet to a strong sense of nation and state. And that is consistent with research that was conducted in 1990 by Afrobarometer, where they discovered that over 90% of Ugandans prefer to refer to themselves by their tribe and family than being called Ugandans.
We prefer Muganda,
I'm Muganda, I'm Anacholi, I'm Nyankole, you know, we are, you know, this is, but the thing of saying we are Ugandans, it doesn't there. So advancement amongst the youth is not yet discussed at that level, but at an individual and family level, people are so determined to advance at an individual and family level. And we believe that these are strong indicators of how the youth should be managed, how issues relating to the youth can be addressed. And secondly, how do you create the necessary condition for development to take place? Development cannot be parachuted. It needs to find a necessary conditions at the local level.
In other words, we should prepare for it
Yes.
to actually thrive, not just assuming it will come out of the blue.
It can't. You cannot wake up, start distributing money all over the place, and then you say we are developing.
We are giving out handouts.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
How does it work, Doctor?
It has to work when people, first of all, are prepared to attach value
To this particular man.
to that particular investment or to that particular money. That has not occurred in Uganda. The sense of attaching value to that. We discovered that when roads are constructed, many of the youth do not associate with that. The questions they were asking, how is our near Ziria?
In other words, it isn't about the value brought to them, but over who has chewed this particular man.
Yeah, you know, the road is complete. They launched it, but they're asking, "Oh, yeah, Sentongo." You know,
is it a culture that has been embedded in our system that everything we look at it in that particular perspective of somebody has cheated? Is it corruption on the rise? What could be the underlying factor, Doctor?
It happens when you live under particular conditions over a long period of time. You internalize them and they become existential. They become the basis for you to interpret reality. And that is what is happening. Ugandans have lived for long in corruption and you know, coercive environments where political actors manipulate them and so on, and elites are behaving the other way, you know, inconsistent with the principles of governance that could lead to development. So people have internalized this as the way to live, as the way to lead. And that is why many of them have become you get into the village. I was in Butambala. That's where I'm born. And we were at a function, and somebody was saying, and I asked,
the politicians.
Yeah, and I asked, but when did this become a job? How do you say, I mean,
when did politics? I think that is something we should look at. Politics has now become like a job. Do you think this is diverting a little bit from the violence? Do you think money has been responsible? The monetization of politics has been the key, the reason behind this system. We are seeing people taking on politics as a job instead of service to the people.
Don't even call it monetarization, because that can be explained away. I call it political entrepreneurship.
Political entrepreneurship.
There is an upcoming class of political entrepreneurs who are just there to trade on politics as a business and not really working to serve the country. Now, how does that relate
with our violence
with the violence here? Is that it feeds into the frustration. It feeds into the perceptions of exclusion. Why? Because those who are doing it as a business end up benefiting more than those who are not in the business. You get it? They go into parliament, they go into councils, and the first sitting, everybody gets a salary increase, allowances in increase. And we interviewed some youths in Jinja municipality. And one of the respondents during the interview, during the focus group discussion, said Jinja's budget, half of the budget, that the money that is collected in Jinja
goes to politicians funding the activities.
Pays, if you have a member of parliament who earns 25 million, where do you get that money?
I've been reading about US and UK politics, and I've been interested with the UK. It says that money that Boris is being paid as a prime minister is less than the money he was earning as a columnist in Daily Mail.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah, because there's regulation. But you have somebody in Budaka who earns 25 million, and in the whole area there is no, Now, coming back to the youth are not stupid. They are very rational actors. They analyze, they understand, they internalize these factors, these experiences. And for them, that is what explains the discrimination, the injustice. Injustice does not only manifest in courts.
So in other words...
No, it is experienced on the streets. And it's a driver for youth mobilization into violence. We believe that if we engaged into creating the necessary relationships for people to understand where we are, and for the politicians to understand the people they lead better, not as voters, but as citizens.
So it must even zero down to the perspectives, the way, our attitude and look at things. Politicians must look at people not as voters, but citizens who have an ideal on where they want to see their country. And the politicians looking at themselves as leaders, not as political entrepreneurs, as you call them.
Exactly. That is why we talk about relationships, because we don't talk about relationships as now you and me sitting here. No, we talk about relationships that define you and me and how we interact. That is why we bring relationships on the table, to talk about how do politicians and people perceive each other, and how do they interact with the youth, with respect to the needs that define a youth and the priorities, the interests that they carry. Because it is always interests that bring us into the same space.
When you talk about youth as being rational people, that people actually think and look at situations and define and approach them in a way that best suits them, what has come to my mind is the hooligans. There are some people who call themselves people power hooligans. Somebody finds a young person who's written a very well researched, analyzed of peace and signs out as a hooligan.
Exactly. It has happened, and that is backed by research, by the way. There was research I share with my students at Makerere. There's a book called Weapons of the Weak.
Weapons of the weak.
How do the weak resist a strong state? And the writer demonstrates how the so-called street vendors, the weak people, how they react, how they engage, the weapons they use to resist a strong state. Amongst the weak people, the irrational, the hooligans, for them, when you militarize the street, it is an incentive to resist you more because they know that they got you where they want. It is an incentive in collective action. Read all civil rights movements. Read South Africa, where every time the state increased its presence and coercive means and violence, the slaves organized better.
This reminds me of the time I was a student at Makerere University. I remember during the student strikes, whenever police could fire bullets and tear gas, the strike grew stronger.
Yes.
Grew stronger. Instead of actually supporting and reducing their impact, it just grew stronger. So it is the same research. It's the same. I'm understanding now the mechanism.
That is how the mechanism work. But as I said, that some of these are not very attractive to leaders to hear. They want quick things, go clear, you know. That's what George Bush said did in Iraq. He said, bring them on, we shall overwhelm them. And until now,
they have not overwhelmed.
They have never defined how victory looks like in Iraq.
That is Dr. Sentongo Ashad, that is this ED of GAPS Uganda Limited. The discussion is on the rising violence amongst the young people, the response to exclusion, discrimination, and injustice. It is something we are highlighting today on the big debate, rising violence amongst the young people, and we are looking at their responses to exclusion, discrimination, and injustice. And yes, it is with Dr. Sentongo Ashad, that is from GAPS Uganda Limited. He has broken down there is direct violence, but we must deal more with indirect violence. He has highlighted looking at self-advancement, value system, society bonds. And then my question, Doctor, is broken down and is zeroed down at what does this mean for our government? What does this mean for governments?
Thank you. It's unfortunate that governments tend to be overwhelmed or preoccupied by structural arrangements, having a constitution. A constitution won't tell me how I relate to you.
True.
It doesn't.
It just defines laws and everything.
It just defines laws and so on. So there are fundamentals that we think government should pay attention to. I've just been hearing discussions about the national curriculum review. For instance, in the research, in the recommendations we have, we believe that the National Curriculum Center should integrate relationship building, resilience training, social bond development, and other forms of value systems that bridge gaps between people into the education system so that children grow up, educationists learn how these work to build a more stable and peaceful society. They should also be integrated into the police training and in the military training. We have seen countries where riots occur, the police and the military are deployed, and they manage the crowd without firing a bullet.
Do our people here listen? Could we manage them minus firing a bullet?
Can
we disperse those?
Yes, yes, it is possible. I'm telling you that people understand, they rationalize, and they are able to understand when they are discriminated against, when injustice persists, when exclusion persists, and they react.
In other words, our approach must be at solving the exclusion, the discrimination, and injustice. And if we solve these ones, Doctor is saying we will not see violence.
It will absolutely reduce. People will always find reason to be different and to conflict. That is within human nature. The problem is management. We believe that once the youth in Uganda are exposed to systems and processes And across, don't do it only in schools and when they step out of the school. Political parties, the code of conduct they use, must carry those values and they should promote them to have more peaceful political activities. Civil society organizations, military, police, nurses, medical schools, universities, these are values that must be entrenched, even in the public service code of conduct. Local governments should have within themselves, as they do workshops, on how to manage government funds, part of that should be a training on relationship building and resilience building. It is possible, it is achievable. The problem is government ready to take these on? Right now you have a curriculum review going on, and these things are not mentioned. The tendency is if you promote science and you promote research and business skills, people will become more development oriented, and you'll have better capacity. The problem is what relationships guide that? What type forms of interaction shape the business acumen that you are trying to promote? For me to learn trade is okay. But if you don't know how to deal with people in a highly divided society like this, divided in a sense that we are religiously divided, culturally divided, over 50 ethnic groups in the country, political parties and so on. How do you do business and succeed within that environment? What does it mean at a relational level? And if you experience a problem, what forms of resilience come into play to help you overcome that? What social networks explain success and failure in that kind of environment? These are the things that we think government should engage in. We are Africans, and Africans are very strongly attached to relationship, to social bonds, to value systems.
So in other words, you're calling on government to prioritize what defines us as Africans.
Exactly. Yes. That is very critical. That is very critical. There was this assumption by the colonial governments that the state is powerful and it is a structure, and it is the role of citizens to comply with the state. But we have seen that compliance actually is debatable.
We are seeing more of the defiance.
We have seen more of defiance. We have had civil wars, we have had military coups, we have had all this. We are seeing collective action in the streets, all them defining defiance against the state that you are supposed to comply with. How do you build compliance? One of them also, if you are to go into that direction, is to prioritize those values.
If you prioritize the values, we'll be addressing the structural system.
No. We'll be addressing the relational system.
The relational system.
The relationships as the foundation for structures to be stable. For you to have a stable constitution, you need to have people who understand each other. For you to achieve Vision 2040, 2050, the assumption is that the departure point is the same. We all understand where we are, and we are going to move towards that. But are we there really? Can you answer that question, whether Ugandans understand where they are now for them to achieve Vision 2040 or 2060 or 80?
In our discussion, we've highlighted of how politics has shifted to political entrepreneurs. Now my question is, what does this research, what does this violence amongst the young people that is rising and addressing it, this particular response mean to our leadership as well?
We would like them to understand that the increasing levels of violent participation in politics are outcomes of enduring concerns that the youth have and experience on a daily basis. And that is injustice, exclusion, and discrimination. There is definitely, for somebody to steal billions of money, every day a newspaper reports billions swindled. Don't think youth do not internalize this as discrimination and injustice to them and their future. Therefore, the rising violence is a reaction. It is an outcome. And therefore, they should actually look at it more of a symptom and look for the underlying causes, the actual drivers. And that is where the solution lies. Thomas Kuhn called it a paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift.
A need to retool the way we think about the problems that we are experiencing.
You mean we should format and start again?
We should rethink our approaches to dealing with youth participation in violence and go further down to the actual drivers and causes than responding to symptoms. You can come up with laws and come up with these, but all these are structural arrangements. People know.
We are having the POMA, Public Order and Management Act. You mean we always have police always in position to see that it deals with these violent activities and everything. In other words, doctor, by virtue of your research, you're telling us, no, that is not the way to go.
It's not the way to go. It produces temporally. It produces, in conflict studies, they call it negative peace. The absence of fighting, but the grievances that lead to the conflict persist.
Negative peace
and
positive peace.
Peace. Positive peace is when even the underlying drivers have been addressed.
Negative is short-lived.
Negative is short-lived. You deploy on the street, clear up everybody and say everything is okay now.
Doctor, we're a peaceful country. For that we always boast about and we always provide a security to other countries to ensure that they are peace. So by virtue of your look at Uganda, are we peaceful? Are we in negative peace or positive peace?
It depends on what you call peace. And that's what I wanted my India to explain. Peace for all for peace.
All for peace. It says, my India says.
What is peace?
Peace is, according to him, from the say tolerating one another, and he gave an example that because we are having issues with animals, we decide that these animals should go to the game park and we the human beings be wandering around the other and everything. So don't you think my India's definition carries some water?
It's a very small piece of the puzzle. It's a very small piece. I tolerate you, you tolerate me, then what?
Peace.
Then what? I need to have food on the table. Tolerating you doesn't put food on my table, does it?
If you don't have food, you do not have peace.
You can't. That is one angle I'm telling you.
You're looking at peace of the mind. So peace must not entirely look at absence of war, but rather as well the state of mind.
It's first of all peace is local. Peace that you can talk about in Kenya, Uganda, it all means different things at the local level. So, for you to say peace, negative or positive, you need to put all those factors together. Quite a lot of factors that you need to put together. Peace is not about sleeping until morning when somebody it doesn't know what it's going to do the next day. I was reading one book and the writer was defining government. And he said, government is what you think about when you're alone at night.
Government is what you think about when you're alone at night. Yes, expound on that particular statement.
The idea is that everything government does must impact on you positively. And knowing that tomorrow, the next day, I'm going to be okay. You get it? In other words, don't look at government in form of structures and governments and the army and then you say we have a parliament. And if everything combined, what it impacts on you is what they call government. That is one view.
Rising violence amongst the youth. We're looking at the response to exclusion, discrimination, and injustice. And yes, it is with Dr. Sentongo Ashad, the Executive Director, GAPS Uganda. Now, if you're looking forward to having a more peaceful time, as we're looking at the roadmap ahead of 2021 polls, In your research, did you look at the rising violence when we are heading to polls?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Actually, this research is timely.
Yeah, true.
Is that one of the things that need to be done for us to deal with the rising political violence is that the space for public debate and conversation must be not only expanded but well protected. It matters when people say what they want to say, no matter whether you agree or not. If you are an opposition member, allow government to say what they want to say.
That is tolerance.
If you are from government, allow the opposition member to, okay? But it should not be simply public discussion. It should be guided by those values. The need for us to create an enabling environment for personal development to occur.
Value system, society, bonds of advancement.
Building relationships, having conversation, mutual respect, and so on. That is one. Two is that there is a need to develop within the political parties. Each political parties develop levels of responsibility that mainstreams relationships and resilience and social bonds within their political activities. It is very critical that each political party adopts a more civilized approach to political activities, one that actually reinforces relationships, social bonds, and resilience amongst the youth. And these are important values. We can unpack each in terms of activities, in terms of programs. Each one of them is critical. This is the necessary condition. It is unfortunate that in the formation of our states from day one, we never had this conversation in terms of how we should relate and coexist. The assumption was that once we have a constitution, it is done.
So in other words, as we're looking at education curriculum review, as we're wrapping up this discussion.
Police code of conduct, military code of conduct, everywhere.
We shouldn't only look at maybe adding Kiswahili and other languages and everything, but we should look as well at courses that ignite our people, young people, to think about the way they relate with one another.
Exactly. Exactly. That is critical. Some people say, and those values are there within culture, within our religions, within our social interactions, and even academically, research. We have produced them, they exist, and they have been used, mainstreamed into what in Ukraine, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, what Ukraine did was that they rewrote history books, not to remove Ukrainian history, but to add values, to say, don't say, I'm using now Uganda as an example, don't say that the Baganda collaborated with the colonialists to kill others. They removed those things, and they instead said Ugandans did that. They changed language, and this has contributed to more unity. The way people learn about their country.
The way people learn about their country.
The way people participate in politics, the way people participate in the economy is guided by protecting those fundamental values.
Protecting those fundamental values. Thank you so much, Dr. Sentongo. We'll have you some other time to talk about violence, breaking it down. That is the discussion. Remember, you can catch this discussion. It's going to stay there forever. That is on Facebook at Record TV Uganda. And yes, we'll be having more of Dr. Sentongo Ashad. More so in this time of the electoral period. There is so much violence that we see. And as well, talking these pertinent questions like structural systems, relationships, and so much more. My name is Stephen Mayombwe, and this is the Big Day Breaker Show.